Summoner is one of the 6 base game secret archetypes in Remnant 2. It's a class all about summoning, sacrificing, and massively buffing your explosive weapons, skills, and mods. Whether you want to command your own army, blow them to smithereens, or forego the archetype's identity entirely, the Summoner has multiple methods of causing chaos. Just like with Engineer, Summoner has some groundwork that needs to be laid out before we can talk about the skills. Minions are the name of the game with Summoner, and just like the Engineer's tech, they have some stats and mechanics that aren't explained to the player. For starters, each minion has their own set of stats, those being damage, health, armor, and elemental resistances. I'll bring most of these up when I get to their individual sections, but it's worth mentioning that all 3 minions have 75 bleed, fire, shock, and acid resistance on top of their armor DR. Summons also gain a stackable 25% max health bonus for each difficulty you play on, up to 100% more max health when playing on Apocalypse. This is additive with the summon health bonus from the Rugged trait. Each summon has a weak spot damage bonus of 50%, which cannot be increased by sources that buff them. They also don't benefit from total crit chance sources, which is a big shame. Next is the act of summoning. All 3 summons convert a different amount of red health to gray health on cast. Like Ring of Omens and other sources that give you Misty Step, this conversion is actually a flat amount of health, although in Summoner's case the percentage never updates on the skill card. This health conversion counts as taking damage, proccing sources like Indignant Fetish and Hardcore Metal Band. It also works with Necklace of Flowing Life, at least if you're summoning and sacrificing regularly. You can run gray health trinkets like Ring of the Damned and Canine Keepsake if you want, but Summoner's built-in health regen makes this not ideal, as you'll be constantly losing stacks. It's also worth mentioning that the act of summoning cannot kill the player, so there's no risk of doing so if you're on low health. Lastly is the sacrifice mechanic. Holding the skill button allows you to detonate your summons. Each of the summon sacrifice damage scales with their remaining HP. The more they have, the stronger the attack. Sacrificing also refunds some skill cooldown at a 1:2 ratio of their health. For every 2% of their remaining health, you'll be refunded 1% cooldown when sacrificing them. Unlike other sources that reduce skill cooldown, this one does not scale with cooldown reduction bonuses like expertise. That 50% can be as much as a minute and as little as 1.5 seconds. To be fair, if it did scale like the other trinkets, you could easily spam sacrifice with little investment in cooldown. It also seems that minions can sometimes drop ammo packs on death. Not super reliable, but it is something that can happen. The Summoner's first skill is Root Hollow. These little meatballs have 2 charges, convert 15 of your health to gray health on cast, have 135 armor, and 175 health. They have 2 different attacks. A rolling strike that can hit multiple times, and a leaping bite that can sometimes hit weak spots. These moves deal 60 to 180 and 36 to 108 damage respectively. Their sacrifice deals 150 damage in a scalable 5-meter radius. The damage falloff is pretty harsh, so definitely invest in amplitude if you want to go for sacrifice spam. When killed or sacrificed, they take 30 seconds to cool down per charge. Of the 3 summoner skills, these little guys are my absolute favorite. I loved the hollow summons in Remnant 1, and seeing them return in the second game was a welcome treat. They're definitely the most limited of the bunch though, at least in terms of range. What they lack in range, they make up for in speed. They're by far the most swift minion, able to keep up with the player and grounded enemies alike. At level 5, the Summoner unlocks Root Flyers. They have 2 charges, and on cast they convert 10 of your health to gray health. They have the same armor value as Hollows at 135, but a lower total health at 155. Their main attack is a homing projectile that deals 72 to 216 damage. Should there be multiple enemies nearby, the Flyer will fire up to 2 additional homing shots that deal 40 to 120 damage. Both of these can weak spot hit, although the chances of it happening consistently are very low. On death or sacrifice, they take 45 seconds to cool down per charge. Sacrificing them causes a 3-meter wide explosion that deals 50 damage. It also sends out 3 very fast homing projectiles that deal 100 damage each. Walls and other obstacles can prevent the attack from going off on sacrifice though, so be sure to only sacrifice when you have a clear view of your target. The projectiles can also just not target enemies sometimes, even when it's a straight shot between the 2. Flyers are also the only summon that can benefit from rate of fire buffing sources like Frenzy Dust and Haste. It's quite noticeable too, and highly recommended if you plan on running Alchemist or Explorer. Being capable of flight does grant Flyers some serious advantage over the other 2 minions. Combined with their homing attacks, they're the one summon that can work on pretty much every boss. They are the most squishy though, and they aren't very agile either. Despite them floating about 5 feet above the ground, ground-based melee enemies can still easily hit them. Overall, they're very capable. Not the coolest option, but not everything can be as sick as the meatballs. Root Reaver is the summoner's level 10 skill. It only has one charge and converts 35 of your health to grey health on cast. Reaver has the highest health and armor at 375 and 200 respectively. It also has the most attacks compared to the other two minions, totaling at 6. These moves consist of a double overhead swing, an uppercut, a horizontal swipe, a leaping horizontal swipe, a spinning attack, which hits 4 times, and a backwards leap into an explosive axe toss. The uppercut, overhead swings, and horizontal slashes deal 76 to 228 damage per hit. The spin attack deals 47.5 to 142.5 damage 4 times, and the axe toss deals 28.25 to 84.75 damage on the initial hit and 95 to 285 on the blast. These attacks can weak spot hit, and when they do, it's quite nice. On death, the Reaver takes an enormous 2 minutes to recharge, tying it with Redemption and Invoker skills for the longest skill cooldown in the game. Reaver Sacrifice deals 200 damage in a scalable 6-meter radius. It also drops 5 Spore Bombs on the ground which deal the same damage. They also seem to detonate at random intervals. For some reason, Ruthless buffs the damage of the initial Sacrifice Blast but not the Spore Bombs afterwards. Unlike Root Hollows, neither of the Reaver Sacrifice explosions suffer damage falloff, making it a very effective crowd clearing tool. Although it is the tankiest, it's also the slowest. This is evident when you're running Summoner as your sub-archetype and don't have access to Ruthless. It's very common to be running to the other side of a boss arena only to look behind you and see this big husk of wood dragging its feet behind you. Thankfully, there are other methods of increasing your summon's movement speed, and while it pains me to say this, they are by far my most used minion on Summoner. Reaver's damage is just way too good to pass up when compared to the other options. Being the most formidable of the bunch helps too, especially when you max out Rugged. Starting off with the Summoner's perks is Dominator. This damage perk increases mod, skill, and explosive damage by 3.5% per level, providing 35% to all of them at level 10. At level 6, it also grants a 5% crit chance boost to said sources. Dominator is a very powerful damage perk. Any source that counts as both mod and explosive, or skill and explosive, will double dip. War Stomp and Impact Cannon are both skills that deal explosive damage, so they receive a 70% damage boost from Dominator. Any weapon that has an explosive mod attached to it will also double dip. Aphelions, Arbalists, Meridians, Starshot, etc. These empowered explosions can be dangerous to yourself and your summon companions, so be sure to invest in kinship if you run them. Residue is the Summoner's team perk. When summons expire, they leave a non-scalable 3-meter wide aura for 10 seconds that heals allies for 2.5% of their max health per second. At level 7, these auras also increase your healing effectiveness by 20%. At best, this perk is alright. At worst, it's annoying. It can be a nice bit of extra healing when you can utilize it. There's a few things going against it though. First off is the size. It's way too small. You can barely fit your trio of friends inside of it, and unless you're out of combat, some of your friends will need to crouch down, lest the 3 of you start shooting each other in the back of the head. Secondly is how they appear. The auras are created by a little soul drop that appears out of your summons when they die. They float down to the ground and create the ring. If your summons are at a distance when they expire, you would have to run all the way over to them to get the heal. This wouldn't be so bad if the aura duration wasn't 10 seconds. You basically need to be committed to staying near your summons at all times if you want to benefit from the healing aura. And lastly, the healing really isn't that much. And you might be thinking, well, they also increase your healing effectiveness by 20%, so your other healing sources are stronger inside them. You would be right, if that's actually what the auras did. You see, the secondary effect of the perk is straight up inconsistent. Sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. I have stood in piles over 100 times. I cannot tell you what makes the extra healing kick in. If the ring lasted longer, could be scaled up, healed like 3% per second, and was actually consistent with its secondary effect, the perk would be way better. The Summoner's utility perk is Outrage. Sacrificing your summons grants you 3% total lifesteal per minion sacrificed for 10 seconds. At level 8, it also increases your movement speed by 15% for the same duration. Outrage can be a very helpful panic button in combat. You can use it to stand your ground with the lifesteal, or run away with the movement speed bonus. The lifesteal bonus does scale with the actual number of minions you sacrifice, so it won't be as effective when running Reaver. You'll also need to run the Soulmate Legendary bonus if you want to achieve the maximum amount of lifesteal possible with the perk. If you don't sacrifice often, then this perk won't really do anything for you. Back in the day, you had to sacrifice your summons to get the other half of your damage perk. Since it's been changed, you don't really have to sacrifice your summons unless you really want to. It doesn't help that the cooldown bonus and damage for sacrificing your summons scales with their remaining health. This encourages you to do so when they're healthy, which may not be the case if they've been out for a while in a dungeon or boss fight. Not being able to select which summons you sacrifice doesn't help either. If I could choose to sacrifice just one hollow or flyer, I'd be much happier utilizing this perk. Insight is the Summoner's Relic perk. Using a relic grants your minions 5% health regen a second and a 15% damage boost for 30 seconds. At level 9, it also increases their crit chance by 15% for the same duration. Insight is a very powerful way of keeping your summons topped off on health. That damage and crit boost aren't too shabby either. Its design does kind of encourage you to pop one every 30 seconds if you want to keep your minion damage maxed out, but this period of time is generous enough where it just sort of naturally occurs in combat. With 10 relic charges being your maximum with most relics, you'll have plenty of time to work with it, especially if you use relics that have a long duration like Decayed Heart, Shielded Heart, Quilted Heart, etc. Lastly, we have the Summoner's Prime perk, Ruthless. When Summoner is your Prime archetype, dealing damage to your summons grants them the Enraged status for 40 seconds. This buff increases their attack speed by 20% and movement speed and damage by 50%. If you really want to play around your summons, you gotta have Ruthless in your setup. The movement speed bonus alone is super handy, and that attack speed and damage increase make your minions hit way harder. That damage bonus is also deceivingly small. You see, summons have an odd interaction with all damage sources that are applied directly to them from sources like Attack Dog's Howl, Red Wells from Gold Digger, and Ruthless. They all have their numbers doubled when applied directly to summons. This means Ruthless increases your minions' damage by a whopping 100%. It also increases the damage of their sacrifice attacks as well. Hollow Blasts get the full bonus, Flyers sadly get nothing, and Reavers have their initial blast boosted by the effect. You can see now why it's worth running Summoner Prime if you want to make your summons as strong as possible. The 40-second duration is quite generous as well, and since shooting your minions reapplies it, it basically has unlimited uptime. Do be careful to not straight up murk your summons though. It's worth investing in kinship at least a little bit to prevent accidental workplace casualties. Summoner's trait is Regrowth. It grants 0.15 health regen per second per level, or 1.5 health per second at level 10. Passive health regen can be incredibly useful for a variety of reasons. Obviously, we need health to live, so being able to regain lost health without doing anything is pretty good. It is only 1.5 flat health per second, but with other sources of regen and healing effectiveness, it adds up. Triage, Blood Root, Root Water, Tranquil Heart, and the myriad of regen trinkets combine to let you passively heal a ton of health per second in the right setup. This passive healing fits Summoner pretty well, especially since summoning turns your red health gray. All you need to do after summoning is wait a few seconds and you'll be healed. Anastasia's Inspiration can be procced 24/7 by just having a single point invested in the trait. Overall, Regrowth is a pretty good trait, one that I run frequently in many builds. The way I see Summoner, you can build it for one of three ways. Invest fully into active summons, sacrifice loop summons, or just use the archetype for the explosive skill and mod damage scaling. In these videos, I typically try to make builds with the archetype at hand as the prime option, although Summoner's Prime perk only really benefits one, arguably two of the ways to build for it. When it comes to Summoner setups, they're even easier to build for than the Engineer. At least with that archetype, each skill has different ways to play around them. Summoner minions are pretty cut and dry. They do have their own attacks, but none of them have any particular benefit that inspires creativity and build making. That being said, I tried my best to make these three builds interesting in their own way. For the Hollow build, I decided on an explosive mod setup. Chaos Gate Archon was my secondary archetype of choice, and my trinkets were Gift of Euphoria, Burden of the Gambler, Braided Thorns, Akari Warband, and Burden of the Destroyer. For weapons, I ran Detonator Thorn and Feedback Corrupted Meridian. My fragments were Mod Crit Chance, Crit Damage, and Explosive Damage. For traits, be sure to pick up Rugged and Kinship. This is the obligatory explosive summoner build of the video. If any of the minions are deserving of being blown up, it's definitely the meatballs. Now even with kinship maxed out, it's still very easy to kill your minions in a few shots. Thorn alone will easily one-shot them, so maybe don't invest in amplitude like I did for this build. The extra AoE size does allow easy application of the enrage buff though, so there's that. Root Hollows can be pretty good at distracting enemies in the overworlds, allowing you to deal with targets uninterrupted. They aren't tanky by any means, but their short cooldown means that if and when they do fall, they won't be gone for long. At first I wanted to make the flyer build a sacrifice loop setup, but after playing around with it, I found the results to be very underwhelming. Despite their sacrifice sending out 3 homing projectiles, the resulting damage just isn't worth it in my eyes, at least with Summoner in the prime slot. I did the same build with Invoker as my prime instead, and it was noticeably better. However, since I want to keep the main archetype as the prime one in these builds, I ended up making a raw damage setup for them instead. Impact Cannon Engineer was my secondary archetype of choice. My trinkets were Silver Ribbon, Burden of the Sciolist, Crimson Dreamstone, Shadestone, and Burden of the Destroyer. My weapons were Momentum Bonesaw with corrosive rounds, and Extender Repeater Pistol with Hotshot. Relic choice doesn't really matter, and my fragments were crit damage, and skill crit chance. With this setup, your flyers can hit upwards of 2k damage on crit. This is way more damage on average than what you would get from sacrifice looping them. Plus, you get to run Impact Cannon, which is getting a massive damage boost from all of our combined sources. When you leave flyers to do their own thing, they're honestly a lot like Engineer's Flamethrower Turret. They don't fire super fast, but their damage is consistent. Benefiting from fire rate and haste buffs is pretty cool too if you can work Frenzy Dust or Gold Digger into your setup. They also don't have a limited resource like the Flame Turret. Their ability to split their projectile into 3 also helps with ad phases like those found in Rootmother's fight. All in all, flyers are fairly well rounded. They're definitely the squishiest of the bunch, so be sure to invest in Rugged in case they catch a stray hit from a boss. Now this is the real sacrifice setup of the video. Way of Kayula Invoker was my secondary archetype, and my trinkets consisted of Legacy Protocol, Soul Feast, Burden of the Stargazer, Burden of the Rebel, and Burden of the Destroyer. I'm now just realizing as I do the voiceover that I included the Destroyer in like all 3 builds. I did not mean for that to happen. I apologize. Weapon choice doesn't really matter here. As long as you have something to apply in Rage, that's all that really matters. My fragments were skill cooldown, cast speed, and skill crit chance. The loop is pretty much just summon Reaver, shoot it, sacrifice, Way of Kayula, repeat. When every bomb lands, it does some pretty good damage. It easily wipes groups of ads with 0 issues. The only problem it has is the way these spore bombs spread out. Sometimes they'll roll away and subsequently miss targets. It's why I highly recommend investing in Amplitude at the very least. Swapping out Legacy Protocol for Echo Chamber wouldn't be a bad idea either. You would just need to work a bit more cooldown into your build. Before we move on, I wanted to say that unlike the engineer builds, all 3 of these setups can be used with either summon. Like I brought up earlier, all 3 minions share a lot in common, and therefore benefit from most of the same sources. Your minion choice is pretty much down to personal preference. Obviously, flyers are the more consistent for airborne targets, but Reaver does have the Axe Toss. Hollows, on the other hand, could definitely use some love. If they had a base summon cap of 3, that would massively help them stick out from the other 2. Also, why does summoning cost health in the first place? It kinda makes sense for the first 2 as they have relatively short cooldowns per charge, but Reaver's is way too long. I think the health conversion could be entirely removed. That, or you could make the health cost only proc when your skill is still recharging, as a sort of cost for the remaining cooldown. While it is kinda nice to have synergy with self-damage trinkets and Necklace of Flowing Life, I don't think many people would miss the mechanic if it were removed. Summoner is a fairly well-rounded archetype. It's held back by some jank with the AI, and not everything is hooked up properly. It is, however, a pretty good support archetype for explosive weapons, mods, and skills. If you do want a full stack summons, you have a lot of options with the other archetypes and mods to choose from, so it's not really that bad. It's definitely not pushing the top 7 archetypes by any means, but I still enjoy running it on occasion. Whether you want to command an army of your own, or just blow stuff up, the Summoner always raises hell on the battlefield.